James Robert Elliott here. I'm here with Pam Ray. We got a kick-ass topic and conversation today. It's going to be about listening from the heart and really how the power really of listening and the ROI too. It actually will cost you not to do this, and
Yeah.
it'll save you and make you money. Sorry, you're listening to listen from the heart, both as a leader and for your own community. So welcome, Pam. Thank you very much for being here with me today.
Thank you, James. It's so exciting to be here. I love talking about this program and
Amazing.
connecting with communities that, can benefit from it.
Well, likewise as well. It's great to have you here as well. We get each to try our own little snowball mics and test these out as well, which is
Yep.
awesome. So let's get right into it. And I love. I mean, everyone's like, "Oh, I'm a good listener," or "Oh, I'm a good conversationalist," so I'm a good communicator. And I say with love, there's room for improvement for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Always room for improvement. And most people, Stephen Covey said this. You had a really great quote on your website that I saw. One of the deepest, and by Stephen Covey, one of the best business speakers, writers, authors, and that one of our deepest needs as humanity, as humans, is to be understood. And I love that quote because in Stephen Covey, in one of his other books, he also says most people, their I guess their mission or their modus operandi, so to speak, is not to just listen so we can understand, but it's to listen so we can respond and give our thoughts and our thing and our pitch or our opinion or whatever. It's not listening from a neutral place without going all this stuff in back of my mind, just to understand. So the power of conversation. Let's talk about that a little bit as well. You and I had a conversation, starting top down from organizations. So maybe give us some of the big things, benefits and maybe costs of not really truly listening and not listening from the heart and being empathetic, being empathic. I mean, it's the sign of great leaders nowadays. Everyone's talking about great leaders need to be empathetic, and I believe it. But let's hear your thoughts on this, please, as a leader and a community member.
Yeah, let me give you a little bit of background for how I recently, as we moved through the pandemic, got to the point where I truly believe that the economic bottom line for our companies is going to depend on their attentiveness to the mental health crisis, because it is an issue that is affecting their workforce. It is affecting, for educators, it is affecting educators and students. And at home, it's affecting our family. And this all started, this was growing as a crisis before the pandemic, but the pandemic has made it global. Nobody is being left out of this. And so you can't hide from it. You can't look the other way anymore and pretend it's going to go away, because it's not going to go away. But just real quick background is that 10 or 11 years ago is when I first started down the path of, quote, empowering workforce readiness. And I was doing it on an economic level because I discovered I was among the first generation of parents to raise my kids on screens. All that went with that. What I didn't see coming was that I was also the first generation of parents to launch my kids with a 20th century education into a 21st century economy. And so I focused on how do we connect our kids' education with today's jobs. And so it was the economic issue. Well, throughout my career, I've always asked. I was in public policy. I worked for elected officials for 16 years. I had my government relations business for 16 years. I was in nonprofit leadership. And whenever anyone brought a change type of proposal for funding, policy, or whatever, I would always ask, what's the economic impact of your change and what's the human impact of your change?
So true. So true.
And so I was always looking at that holistic, even though most people are always looking at the what. I was looking at the who plus the what. And I think it's become relevant. The whole person has become relevant no matter where we are, whether we're at work, school, or play. And so as we went through the last decade and I was dealing with that, how do we connect education and living through it, and with our, with jobs, living through it, taking on leadership roles? Around 2017 or so, I started to notice the anxiety showing up in the workforce. And at the same time, it showed up for me at home as a family. My daughter started going through a horrible experience with anxiety, which was really happening in high school, but I didn't see it until she got to college. And it was a couple of years, and we finally got to a point where I didn't know how to help her. And I said, Sarah, I don't know how to help you. And she said, Mom, I don't know what to ask for. And the teachers were saying, I got to tell you, this isn't just high school and college. This is happening in middle school and elementary school too. So we went forward and set up a program based on Stephen Covey that I had learned,
Cool.
based on his listening to understand, and based on what he teaches as the Indian talking stick method, which is what my daughter and I did. Is we pulled together parents, teachers, and students because no one knew how to help each other. No one knew what to do. And so we did it in order to help each other take the next step or ask the next question. And we all came together. We did a number of different sessions. We had a mix of all three groups, and we asked one question, just one. What is it you want us to know?
Hmm.
And then we listened. And we didn't sit there and come back with, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Answers, the thinking thing. We just listened and we felt it. And we began to understand what was happening with our kids. They began to see where we were coming from, which was really, why don't you talk about this, mom and dad? Why can't we talk about mental health? And then the teachers were able to talk about some of the impacts it had with kids showing up in school. So it really did help everyone to take the next step or ask the next question. Then we get into the global pandemic, and I had just started to take this to the community. And I'm not a mental health professional. I'm a parent, I'm an advocate. And so my goal was, not everybody needs a therapist. But everyone needs to be understood, and I can play a role in that. So throughout the pandemic, the last 2 years, I evolved it into this program called Listening from the Heart. And it really is about getting our leaders. It's about getting our CEOs, our superintendents, our executive directors on board with helping to do the number one thing to get through the stigma around mental health is to start the conversation. And so I use the model my daughter and I started as one example. But then I also use the example of film, like the power of film to start the conversation. And I can tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. But the cost of not acting on this is huge. And you and I talked about the cost of this is happening. And I wanted to share some of that with your listeners today.
Please. Yeah.
Last year, the World Health Organization came out and estimated that the cost of mental health in our global economy was $1 trillion a year.
It's a lot of money. Wow.
They also estimated that for every $1 you put into addressing mental health, you get a $4 return on improved productivity.
That's a hell of an investment.
So I dug deeper, and one of the other stats I found was from the CDC, and they cited depression because there's so much depression. And they said depression causes an estimated 200 million lost work days annually and cost employers somewhere between 17 and $44 billion. Pretty staggering. And if you come here to where we are now with workforce and people not being engaged, and there's a lot more talk now about people not being engaged.
True,
Why aren't people engaged? Well, they don't feel cared for is a huge reason.
Yeah.
And so I found a couple of really up-to-date numbers on profits and on revenues for companies. So how would you like 21% more profit in your company, right? Companies with high engaged workforce are 21% more profitable.
Wow.
How would you like 4 times more revenue? High-performing company culture leads to 4 times greater revenue growth. And this gets down to another quote. This one's by Teddy Roosevelt. Cool. Nobody is going to know. Let me just read it, make sure I get it right.
Yeah.
Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care.
Right.
And that's where listening from the heart comes in. Whether or not you learn to do it, to listen as a leader, by sharing your own story, because that's one way leaders can do it, is they can say, wow, I have these problems. I have these things with my family. Perfect. Why am I not sharing this with my workforce? Why? Because I might look weak, or I might not be tough, or they might think less of me. No. It actually creates, when you share your story or you listen and let other people share theirs, you create connection. You help people not to feel so alone. Fair. And you create a different kind of culture. You help to get through that stigma around mental health.
Well, and it's interesting because, like you said, and I mean, 15 years worked for IBM, Novella, Novo. You're right. It was almost a them and us, or you and us, versus. I like how you said, share your story, be open, be vulnerable, because then it makes just us. It is us versus, oh yeah, we're up here and you're down here, or it's us and you, and all the animosity and, like you said, disengagement and depression and distrust even. Like, there's so much distrust now of people for their work, their employers, excuse me, management, executives. There's so much distrust because of the hiring and firing and people being treated like numbers and cogs in a wheel. And well, we're going to let these people go because it'll make us look good for this quarter, so someone's going to get their bonus. It's really interesting, and thank you for sharing all these stats and figures, because I mean, when the stats talk, the figures talk. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of cost for something that is actually fairly simple, air quotes, to resolve as well.
Think of it in terms of who before what. And I discovered last July a leadership group that I've been a part of. It's a daily leadership group every day at 6:38 in the morning. It's amazing. And the reason it's amazing and I show up every day is because it values who before what. The leader and the people who have joined that want to know, who are you before what is it you do? And when I showed up the first day and I started into the business spiel, this is what I do. They're like, no, 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 no. Don't tell us what you do. Tell us who you are. It goes to such a different place of a person. It changes, like you feel valued when somebody's willing to listen to who you are and not just what you are. And I don't know about you, but I have never mastered the 60-second tell me who you are, right?
Let
At
alone the
business
30
networking
seconds.
meetings. And in fact, the last couple of years, even before the pandemic, I was like, I am starting to resent this, because I felt like if I am, all they care about is that I fit this into 60 seconds and that they give me the opportunity to do that. It wasn't really about getting to know me or what I did. I don't know what it was, but this leadership group that I'm a part of really, really cares. So we've connected as people, and then we help each other in our businesses. So I know it's a win-win situation. So it doesn't have to be even around stigma. Let's cut through the stigma around mental health. It can be around business meeting. Hey, how are things? Tell me how you are. Not like, is your project done? Are you on time? And all that kind of stuff. Let's stop and connect as human beings. Let's make what I call a truly human connection.
And I love that you're saying this, and I think it's something that executives are becoming more aware of, because back in my corporate days, that was the kind of the wild west of hire and fire. And if we can save money, or we can get a bigger bonus, and our executive can do this or do that, or we got to cut costs, or here's a way to cut costs. But really, they're shooting themselves in the foot. I won't mention any company names, but being laid off. So certain companies, just to re-centralize things, fire everyone that was really, really good at what they were doing, had all the relationships with clients, and bringing it into a centralized model, hiring, kids out of people at a high school to do what we were very experienced in. It just, and of course it was a failure, but someone had a vision. Well, let's cut a cost here and cut a little more costs and cut all the costs and hire and fire. And it's unfortunate that happens, but I think people are becoming more and more aware of it today, or at least more and more aware of the cost of that model and the cost of not putting people first, because people will bail. That the second there's a promise of a more benefits or a more vacation or a more money, people are gone. Versus being an amazing leader and having amazing culture, that people like, no, thanks. I get that there's more money, more vacation. I get it, but or there's more whatever. I'm going to stay here because I love the culture, love the people, love the leaders. So, and that's so powerful.
And you can also, by caring about the people and by doing like a who before what philosophy, you build emotional strength in your workforce, right? In your teams. And so when things do get tough, you have more of a basis and more of a foundation in which to work from, because they're stronger as humans. They're stronger emotionally. So put that toward your ability to help you monetize things, build them from the bottom up.
Fair point. You mentioned earlier too, again, there's all these great stats. You get a 1 to 4 return on investment on, and I'll say air quotes, health, mental health, but just treating people like people, right? And you got the 21% on engaged employees and all kinds of that, right? And it costs $1 trillion a year. What about people? Because I know there's some leaders out there. I know there's great leaders out there that want to be more open, more vulnerable, more authentic. But what if some people are worried about, okay, what are people going to say to me about me? Rather, are they going to use it against me if I'm open? What would you say to people who have that fear, that want to be open, want to be more connective, authentic, be more personable, share more of their personal life, but are afraid it might come back to bite them? What advice do you give? Because I believe you, and when you say, when we open up, everything changed. We're vulnerable. We're like a human, and we treat others like humans. Just the connection and synergies and the engagement. Of course, yes, the bottom line is going to go way up. But what would you say to someone who's worried about being authentic and open and vulnerable?
I would share a resource with them because they, if they're not comfortable telling their story, they can also be a resource for helping their employees to find resources and to find ways
Mm,
forward. So here's what happened after my daughter and I created this program. The next spring, we were like, how do we make this bigger? How do we reach more people? Well, in a couple of months later, in the spring of 2019, our high school sponsored a film
mm,
called Angst by IndieFlix. And their goal was, let's watch this film together in a public viewing, and then let's have a panel discussion afterwards.
oh wow.
And the film itself addressed anxiety. It had parents, it had medical professionals, it had students in it, and they were telling their stories. So everyone watching was like, that's me, that's me,
Huh,
that's me. They were relating. They were getting facts about anxiety. They were getting insights. They were getting coping mechanisms for, like, hold an ice cube in your hand if you're trying to change what your brain is doing, things like that that make a difference. You can offer that. You can be a CEO or superintendent, executive director, or the head of anything, and you can work with this company. And I'll tell you who they are. I get absolutely no kickback on this. This is just such a valuable tool I want to share.
yeah, please.
Is that IndieFlix has what they call a mental health trilogy now. And when we went into the pandemic and they could no longer do in-person screenings, they put it online.
Hmm,
The first one is on anxiety, angst. The second one is called Like, and it's about social media.
hmm,
It actually has the woman in it who created the like button and talks about the unintended consequences of that. But it
kidding.
talks about your social media and our kids from perspectives that give you tools to help you move forward.
Hmm,
And the third one is called The Upstanders, which is about bullying. And since cyberbullying is a horrible thing going on out there, it helps to give tools for that. So if you are a leader and you're like, I don't want to sit down and talk with people, I don't want to open myself up like that. Create this platform. I call it the power of film to start the conversation. And then build your panel after people view the movie, which you can't do in person right now. So, do it online and offer it for a certain period of time for employees and families to watch,
yeah.
and then create a panel. And so during 2020, they did their first corporate panel.
Huh.
And I was like, please let me in on this because, I wasn't a part of that particular program, but I'm like, can you please let me see what's happening here? And they did. And I've watched it so many times. And I want to just share with you and your leaders who are watching this
Please.
that the people on the panel were, for example, the head of SHRM, author of books about defining HR success at
Hmm,
SHRM, the head or the CEO of the Employee Assistance Programs Association, the EAPA,
huh,
the president of the Houston Texans, the head of the U.S. Well-being of
wow,
Deloitte Services, the head of global wellness for Microsoft, and the filmmaker herself, Sheila Andreen.
wow, wow.
And I saw them lean into this panel and say, I didn't realize by telling my own story, I could make such a difference in other people's lives.
Huge.
And one of them even said, Greg DeLapp said, unspoken emotions have power over us. And they do.
It is true.
So, it's another way to move the ball forward in a bigger community, whether it's your workplace or your education community or nonprofit community or other type of community. But I highly recommend it. And it's IndieFlix. And Sheila Andreen has made these, and she has made them to be, of service to other people and to help other people through these things. So, yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you for sharing the great resource. I'm definitely going to watch them as well. It's such a great resource. And you said something powerful too. Whether even if someone's worried about, if I'm a leader or a manager or executive or CEO, whatever, or an entrepreneur or whatever, what will people think? Well, it's interesting how you said that unspoken emotions, unspoken fears and worries have power over us. But when we talk about them and communicate them
Mhm.
and be open and vulnerable, and this is from my own experience too. Wow, did they ever just the gravity of them or the strength
Yeah.
of them just drops through the floor. So to anyone out there, I'll just tag in this part that you were talking about that is worried about being open or authentic or vulnerable. Sure, it might be scary at first, and sure, there's always a chance someone may abuse it, but again, they're losers anyway. If they're trying to really abuse, I don't like that word, but I'll use it.
Yeah.
If they're really trying to take that and harm you for being open and being real and authentic and vulnerable, no, that I wouldn't worry about them because they're going to quickly get a reputation anyways, and so I wouldn't worry. But To your
Yeah.
point, it's so freeing when an employee or a CEO or a leader or whoever, a cog in the wheel or whatever,
Mhm.
shares. And it's so if anyone's worried about sharing and people think, who cares? But look how powerful. And if you do it even once, I promise you that it is very powerful to be real, raw, authentic, open up. In the courses I teach, sometimes it's the
Mhm.
first time in life or in a long time that people are open and vulnerable and authentic, and there's laughs, there's tears, there's
Yeah.
hugs, there's all kinds of great stuff that happens, and people like,
Yeah.
wow, did it feel good to get that off my chest, or wow, did it feel good to be open. And
Mhm.
it's so true. So to everyone that's worried, avoid worrying and try it. I promise you,
Right.
you'll have some
I
amazing effects.
I mean, I totally agree that, that's I was in that place in sharing my story with my daughter because I share a lot of, emotional, vulnerable details about it when I share the story, but it helps other people to go, "Well, I have something I need to share. I have something I can share,"
Yeah,
or, "Here's how I was in that situation. Here's how I moved through it." But the goal for anyone is to take the next step or ask the next question,
right on.
not to stay stuck and not to stay buried in this stuff.
And exactly, or to I call it hiding, or to hide in, because that does nothing for
Mhm.
you, and or nor anyone else. If you want to make an impact, I mean, you got to come out of hiding, and yes, face the fears. We can manage it with tools like NLP, but to your point, you got to be open, you got to be vulnerable, and you got to face your fears and walk through them at some point. And this has been very valuable. I love the resources. And any other last thoughts or the resources? Any other tips and ways for executives to really engage their team and to gain trust? Anything else you have on that?
I think stressing the point that we need to do things differently,
Mm,
while you're doing this is really important, and that's stuff that, it came in on the topic of burnout. It's like, how do you get through burnout? One of the things is you do things differently,
mm,
and so doing this and encouraging other people to know that by doing it, you're creating a safe space for other people to do it.
okay.
Talk about, "We're gonna do this differently." And, you're gonna find bigger and bigger circles around you of people who just appreciate it and grow and connect and feel valued. And right, engagement, you want your employees, your students to feel valued
Fair
and be
point.
engaged.
Fair
So
point. I
thank
love
you.
it.
Thank you so much for this
I love it. This has been amazing. And
conversation.
it's like you want someone to connect with you, connect with them first. And I'll echo your thoughts about when I'm teaching my courses and my leadership courses or NLP courses on neurolinguistic programming. I'm vulnerable first. I'm open up. I'm raw, unreal first, and people are like, wow, and it's amazing. And people just like ding, 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 and they're all just sort of popping or bursting to share their
Mhm.
stories, so to speak,
Yeah,
and to be open and vulnerable, and they get excited when I share, and they're like, holy crap, that feels good.
yeah,
And then it's this instant trust. To your point, instead of talking first, what you do, oh, this is my thing, or I sell this or that at a networking group. Talk to people who they are, or ask them who they
yeah,
are, and what makes them tick, and what fun things they like. I mean, as a little secret too, that will help create trust and rapport because you can talk about things they like because people like
yeah,
them. So, latch on to what they say and create some interest. Be interested versus worrying about being interesting. Be interested in them and what they do. That's going to create rapport automatically and trust automatically anyway. So, this
yeah.
has been amazing, Pam.
Thank you.
Again, listening from the heart. I love it. And I love your website,
Yeah.
buildingsteambridges.com. I love that as well. I love that acronym. Is there an email if someone wants to reach you by email? Is there a good email, or is the website the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can do Pam Ray at Building Steam Bridges, so that'll work. That'll work
Amazing.
great.
Building steam
Yeah, and we're
bridges.
building STEAM bridges because the STEAM education is a head, hands, and heart. It's a holistic education, and that's where listening from the heart comes in. So I have 2 heart-centered programs.
Right on.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Everyone go check her out, buildingsteambridges.com. Thanks so much for being my guest today, Pam. This has been great. I think everyone's got a lot out of it. And everyone go have your best